Hey guys, today I'm joined by Michael Sarnoski for my first entry in a series I want to do where I interview directors. And Michael's a good friend of mine. Say hi, Michael.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
Michael directed the movie Pig and Quiet Place Day One. And he's got another movie coming up. And he's a great director. I love Pig especially. Pig is, I think that's a really great movie.
Thank you.
Some scenes will stick with me for a long time. Especially that chef scene where he dresses down the chef. I felt like I was having an existential crisis in that scene. Like,
that's good. I'm glad. That was. I mean, that's like one of my favorites for sure. It was a fun one to shoot.
Yeah.
It was like.
And the actor who played the chef is so good.
Yeah, he was David Nell, played Chef Finway, and yeah, he was incredible. It was, I don't know, I love that scene. It was great because it sort of felt like filming like a little play. Like you just got to watch this like 9-page scene just kind of play out in front of you and watch this like, you know, this Portland actor who's really talented have to like sit across from Nick Cage and just feel totally undressed and
kind of steal the scene in a way. I mean, Nick Cage is great the whole movie, but he was like phenomenal that
actor. He was amazing.
But anyways, Pig is actually how I met Michael. I've long had a promise, which has been hard to upkeep, but I have a promise that I will watch movies if the directors send them to me. And one day I got an email from none other than Michael, and he said he watched Pretend That You Love Me, and he said, hey, you want to watch my movie Pig? And I'm like, is this a different Pig, or is this the Pig with Nicolas Cage in it? And lo and behold, it was the Pig with Nicolas Cage, and I went to see it at a awards screening.
Yeah, that was like right when you came out to LA, I think.
The first week in LA, and it was fun. It was fun. I got to meet Alex Wolff, who's in the movie, and it was a good time. And we've known each other now for 3 years, I think.
Yeah.
And talk me through your life since then, because you made a studio movie. I did.
I mean, since then, Pig was interesting because I finished it in 2020, and because of the pandemic, I sort of just sat on it for like a year. Like we didn't release it for a year until theaters kind of opened up. So like I had made my first movie, but no one knew about it. So I was still just like an unemployed writer who was like trying to figure out something else, and everyone was like, whatever. And then it came out and people liked it. And then, you know, I did like the kind of circuit of like meetings and generals with production companies and all that stuff. And yeah, I kind of came across, I mean, John Krasinski reached out to me about Quiet Place. He wanted me to take a crack at it. It seemed like a crazy idea to do as a second movie. Like I'm gonna do like a big horror franchise prequel, like that could go horribly wrong.
Yeah.
But I kind of like things that could go horribly wrong. Like I like sort of weird stuff that like seems like a bad idea and seems like a really like narrow sort of needle to thread. And so it was like, well, hey, if I can do like a horror prequel and make it my own, that would be a pretty fun experience. So I did it. Yeah. And I finished it, and yeah, I think it's got a lot of me in there.
Yeah, I think so too. And I remember we were going bowling a lot at the time. Yeah. We went bowling a handful of times, and that's when you were being offered Quiet Place. And I remember you coming up with this idea about a woman who is terminally ill and wants nothing more than to get a slice of pizza. And I'm like, for me, I'm like, that sounds amazing because it's so much more emotional than what you might expect out of a franchise movie. And you know, 2 years ups and downs, out the other side comes a movie that still retains that heart, which is special. I think you went through the gauntlet and you kept the initial nugget you had when we first talked about the movie.
Yeah, that was always when it felt like, oh, am I sacrificing too much stuff? Like at the end of the day, I was like, it's about a dying lady getting pizza at the end of the world. So as long as I can keep that core, that feels unique enough for like a big studio film. And yeah, it was a challenge, but it was also, you know, it was like some of the best times of my life. Like I got to work with tons of talented people. We shot it out in London. Like the crews there are amazing. Got to work with my same cinematographer. Like it was a blast. But then it also was like super stressful at times. And you know, you're trying to figure out how to please a lot of different people and studios and marketing people, and so it's definitely like a dance that you have to do. But it was also pretty wonderful, and I learned a lot.
Yeah. And an interesting thing to note with a studio movie is I feel like coming out of Pig, I feel like I got a feel for what interests you, what makes you tick as an artist. And coming out of a studio movie by you, I'm more so peeling back some layers that are over you to like that then continue to explore who you are as an artist, because like that nugget at the center of the film, that's like a beautiful thing, and I resonate with that. But then there's other things that to me read as like, okay, this is the studio stuff. So there's this, when you're building your oeuvre or whatever, however you say that, there's a sort of through line of who you are as an artist, and I feel like it gets muddied sometimes in that studio system.
Yeah, it definitely does, but I don't know, it's sort of, even when you're kind of struggling with things that feel counter to you artistically, like you're still like engaging with your artistic side and engaging with like what you care about. So like, even if you kind of like don't get everything you want, you still kind of learn more about yourself artistically, like in the absence of getting to do what you like really want. So weirdly, like I don't feel, it's not like wasted time. It's not like overly frustrating, because it's like, oh, I had to make some compromises. I know how I would have wanted to do it differently. I've learned more about my like leanings artistically. So like it was kind of okay that way. But yeah, it's frustrating, but I guess it's kind of the sacrifice you make doing like a big thing, which is why I'm gonna do a smaller thing next. And like big things are really fun, and I wanna do them again, but yeah, it's a lot to juggle. It's a lot of people, and everyone has opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's cool that like, when I finished the film, I was like, I don't know, am I even in this film anymore? Like, you're so just sort of, like there's so much swirling and everything's kind of coming to a head right as you're finishing the movie. And it was nice to like show it to friends and have people see it and be like, oh my God, I totally see you in this movie. And it's fun that a lot of people can be like, I can tell that was not something you wanted to do, but like, but yeah, it was nice that like there's enough soul in there that I can sort of watch it and be like, okay, it's my movie.
Yeah, it's your movie. Yeah. I felt that way too coming out of it, and I think I told you that. I'm like through everything I could still feel you, which is a remarkable achievement, because I'm sure some franchise movies the director looks at and they're like, I'm gone, you know? So you came out the other side with some soul in there.
That would be hard for me to swallow. Like if I really came out the other side and was like, I don't relate to this film at all, that would be hard, because like I spent 2.5 years working on Quiet Place, and if it would be hard not to feel like it was 2.5 years just wasted if you're like, what was that exercise about? But hopefully that won't happen.
So when we're speaking of moving on to a smaller project, you're going to, can I say Ireland?
Yeah, Northern Ireland.
Northern Ireland to shoot your next movie.
Yeah, I'm shooting The Death of Robin Hood in Northern Ireland with Hugh Jackman and Jodie Comer. I'm leaving in a week, less now. And yeah, I'm super excited about it. It was a script I wrote right before Quiet Place, basically like when they were sort of finalizing the Quiet Place deal. I was like, okay, I have like a month and a half to like have another script in my back pocket. So I kind of cranked this one out. It had been something I'd been thinking about for a while. Again, it was something where I was like, this could be a terrible idea. Like, who needs another Robin Hood movie? But I kind of like to think about stuff like that. Like, you know, who's gonna watch a movie about a guy looking for his truffle pig, and how could you do that and still make it like emotionally resonant? Or like, who's gonna watch like a prequel to a horror franchise and expect something different? And who's gonna wanna watch another Robin Hood movie? So like, I kind of like choosing stuff like that seems like a difficult path. And so I wrote it before Quiet Place and was just kind of like, this is gonna be my next movie. Kind of kept working on it in the background, met with actors, Hugh got involved, and yeah, now it's gonna be the next thing. And I sort of wrote it to be smaller. Like, it's sort of, Pig was a very tiny movie, Quiet Place was very big for me. Robin Hood's kind of right in the middle, leaning a little smaller, which gives me a lot more like freedom to kind of surround myself with the people that I want to work with. I'm working with a lot of the same people that I love, brought people onto the team that like I really trust and feel supported by. So I'm trying to, you know, use what I've learned in big stuff and small stuff to kind of do something that feels the most me. Yeah. And it's going well so far.
I feel like money is the biggest deciding factor in where the risk lies in a movie. Yeah. I feel like something like A Quiet Place is so guaranteed because the money's there, that the risk then becomes like losing yourself as an artist, or like getting your ideas on the screen, stuff like that. But then you lose the money, and then it's like this risk and challenge becomes making a story people care about, which I think is where like the most fundamental filmmaking lies. Ed, do you think that having this smaller scale thing after that is going to be invigorating, or?
I hope it's going to be invigorating. I mean, like, I'm sure. Thing is, like, even on a big movie, like, somehow you just like never have enough money and time. So like, you're always going to be like, okay, how do we achieve what we want to do with the limited resources we have? So like, you know, on a big movie, yes, you have more resources, but you're also expected to do much bigger stuff. So at the end of the day, like, it's not like you're just trying to make creative decisions that you can pull off and are like the coolest thing you can do within your means. So I'm not like too worried about that. I'm excited that it's a very like focused, more emotional, smaller film, and like I'm happy that I get to sort of play in that smaller spot. And I feel like everyone assumes that like you just want as much money as you can get to make a movie, but like a big thing with Robin was, you know, we were talking to people and they were like, oh, we could take this out to a studio and get like twice the price for it and like double your budget. And it was like, but we don't. The whole point of this was to kind of make something at the right price, at the right size, and not like bloat it unnecessarily, because then it just like puts more pressure on it to earn money. You're limited in some of your creative decisions because it has to have like more mass appeal. So I think it's just about like make a movie for the right amount of money for how much freedom you want, and go with that. Like, you don't need to like just throw money at stuff just for the sake of everyone earning a little more.
I think that's an interesting perspective. I think people do often come to me with the question of like, what would you do if you had $1 million? And to me, that is an unspeakable amount of money. I don't understand. Like, even from the outside looking in to the industry, I don't understand where like $100 million goes. And maybe even inside being in, you sometimes look around and you're like, what's going on?
Sometimes I'm just like, wait, why? Where did this, like, it's weird. Like, I remember even on Quiet Place, it's like we would have, you know, there's like something we wanted to pull off that would cost like $10,000, which is like a lot of money, but then you're like, you know, they'd be like, oh, we can't afford to do that. And I'm like, what? Like, this, like, how much? It's hard to wrap your head around that amount of money when it's like $70 million versus like $10,000. Like, I still don't understand where it all goes and like when stuff is considered expensive and when it's not, and it's very confusing.
Very confusing. And I'm on the other end. The movie that you saw that made you reach out to me, Pretend That You Love Me, was made for, I say, $0, like subway fare occasionally, but like, you know, I'd take the subway anyways. I like this, you know, it's like that.
You had your camera.
I had my camera. I hung out with friends that day anyways. But yeah, Pretend That You Love Me is about as scrappy as a movie can get. It's just me and a camera and actresses, and very stripped back. And I therefore, money doesn't even come into the equation when it is talking about the risk and challenges of making the movie. And you have sort of your heart on your sleeve, which I think is a beautiful thing about creating at that scale. It is you don't get to hide behind anything. And I think like that level of hiding behind things just like is such a exponential curve that once you hit that like studio, where you don't even know where the money goes, like as the director, which is an interesting thing to hear. But
I know where most of the money goes, but there's like a chunk where I'm like, where did all that go? But yeah, I mean, I loved Pretend That You Love Me. Like, I mean, I think there's something beautiful to be said for not having money. Like, I think people like throw money at things to try and to show people like, hey, look at this scale and this spectacle, and like this looks expensive and cool. But like to not have that crutch and to just be like, how do I make something real that doesn't use that as some sort of shield to show people like, hey, this is a real movie. Like, I think that's what's beautiful about a ton of your stuff, is that it's very honest in that way. It's very much like you feel like you're both watching a movie while also being included in like the making of the movie. As an audience member, which is like really special.
There's way less artifice in design, and artifice is not a bad word. It maybe has a bad connotation, but a lot of filmmaking is artifice, and that is through the structuring and creating of a reality. But when the more you don't have access to that sort of funding and ability to create a different reality, the more you have to set your movie in your own reality. And Pretend That You Love Me is very much walking a line between my actual life and the movie, and both are in the movie. And I think it's interesting. I'm always curious why filmmaking is so relegated to like needing money versus other art forms which are so free and have any level of scale kind of talked about on an even playing field.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think a lot of that is just that, there has been this whole sort of like, there's this mass market around filmmaking where people, like studios and distributors have this like expectation of like what people think a film should look like and feel like. And that's why you just don't see like a lot of very like experimental stuff coming out in theaters where it's they're just like, this is what an audience wants, this is what they think a horror film should look like, this is what they think this is what like the soundtrack for A Quiet Place should sound like, because that's what people expect a horror film soundtrack to sound like. And like I think it's a lot of people just thinking like, no, this is just all the audience will receive, which like has some truth to it. Like I do think it's a cycle of like, the audiences begin to expect what you give them, and so everyone's sort of taste is like adjusted by whatever films look like, and it gets sort of smaller and smaller and smaller. Which is one of my, I always think about that with like AI, is like, I'm not worried about AI like writing an incredible film. I'm worried about like AI dumbing us down slowly, where like as we start to like receive what it's giving us and start seeing that as what media is, we'll just lower our expectations, and like our minds and expectations will become smaller and smaller until we kind of meet in the middle. Like it's the same as studio stuff, and I mean obviously there are people trying to challenge that, but that's like really important, and it's kind of on audiences to be like open-minded as well, and like be open to those kind of weird films that like aren't what you expect. But yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge to get new stuff seen, because there's so many roadblocks between like the festival system and like the distributor sort of pipeline that you have to wind up in after the festivals. And I feel like the average common person or somebody who's disadvantaged or makes something that looks scrappier because that's all they have access to will never get to that world. Which is a sort of sad reality, because there are a lot of people who want to make movies. There's people who are living in marginalized groups, like really poor or disadvantaged people who love filmmaking and probably have a fantasy in their head of making that movie. And all they have for examples of that is what they see in theaters. And offering an alternative to that has been sort of my mission. I think the best part of what I do is something like Pretend That You Love Me is very abstracted to the point beyond our understanding of filmmaking. It's a very new sort of presentation of storytelling, and it will either work or it won't work for people. But I think I'm also sort of this year pushing towards doing films that are a little more classically narrative and structured, and I think in a different way that'll show people maybe that they're not as limited as they think, and by what they have, if you smartly design your worlds and your films around your life and what you have access to and the people and all of your creative strengths and talents.
I mean, I mean, I'm not just saying this to toot your horn, but like, I think it's amazing what you're doing, and I think especially this like last year of making 12 films is, you're showing people like, you don't just have to make like pseudo meta documentaries about your life. You can make a rom-com, you can make an animated film. Like there's the fact that like with your resources and with not a lot of time either, like you can get, I mean, you did that whole video about, the whole like time, money and quality thing, and like you showed like, you can just do it, and it doesn't have to be something that feels cheap or inaccessible or whatever. Like it can be a beautiful classic rom-com. It can be like, I think that's really special to show people not only that it's achievable, but they can also achieve a variety of like a range of the stuff that they can make. So good job. That's
Thank
very
you.
Cool.
It's very flattering. Thank you. I think the hardest thing for people is that they see like everything as a roadblock, like whether it is like the more traditional industry that discourages like people from just going out and doing it, or just their own like lack of free time and stuff like that. And I feel like making 12 features in a year, the message is never go out and do 12 features, because
that would be insane.
I'm very lucky that my life has allowed me the time to solely focus on my art, but most people don't have that. But I think a logical jumping off point would be, okay, this guy can make 12 in a year, so I could make one. It's like I work a full-time job, I only have weekends and I have other obligations, but but like surely with a month's time of that year, I could like create a movie, and some of my movies take way less than a month. Some of them take a couple weeks, and I think the more people begin to accept that, the more they'll actually start making stuff and working through the honing of your craft.
Yeah.
I think that's what's also discouraging is when you first start making something, especially if you don't have the ability to hire, like, if you hire like a cinematographer, an editor, people who have experience, your movie will come out looking like a movie.
Yeah.
But if you're just tackling it yourself with the camera you have and the people your first movie and probably your first 5 movies, if you're like creating at a small scale and fast, are not gonna ring to you as like movies, and then you're gonna be like, I can't do this without this. But all that's really stopping you is the commitment to keep doing it until you hone your craft.
Yeah.
And I think that's another shield you can't hide behind. You can't, if you're really left to your own devices, you can't hide behind the talents of others. Like I've had to become, through like initially not having any money or resources, I've had to become my own editor and cinematographer and get those skills myself. And my first couple movies, I sort of logicked around that because I'm like, I'm going to shoot on a VHS because that doesn't have to look good. It doesn't have to sound as good, But even then, they're rough around the edges, and the story structure is really what you need to be focusing on as you're making your first film, because that's when you learn how to tell a story. And I think people will see the technical stuff being bad in their own work, or not up to snuff, or doesn't meet some standard of quality, and they'll sort of reflect and be like, well, that's not a good movie. But instead they should look at the story components and what they did manage to tell, and the scenes that worked, and the creative choices that worked, to be like, okay, this is what I jump off of. The technical stuff will figure itself out, but like, I did good stuff here is such a valuable thought.
I think it's I think it's amazing that you're doing that with features as well, because like I think a lot of people are, it's a scary idea to like spend a bunch of time making a feature film, knowing that like as your first film it's like probably not going to be that good, and like it's like, oh, but that sounds like a waste of time. But like, no, that's the exercise where you like learn this stuff. I feel like a lot of people, they're like, oh, I'll make like a short, and like it's valuable to make anything, like it's you learn your craft that way. But like to just be like, screw it, I'm gonna make a feature film, good or bad, like, I mean, that's how I like to approach most things. I mean, like my writing phase is usually, I get to a point where I know enough about the story that I'm just like, I'm gonna crank out a vomit pass, and like I know already that it's gonna be bad, but then when I read it, I'm gonna know the things that I did right and the things that appeal to me, and then I'll just sort of edit it and hone it based on that stuff. And like, it's the same with making a film. Like, even if you're like, oh, this is like mostly crap, there's gonna be 10% where you're like, oh, this is like really interesting and speaks to me and feels like me, and then just like focus on that stuff and build off of that next time. And I think this like fear of like taking on some huge thing and screwing it up stops people from doing a lot of stuff. It stops people from writing scripts, because they're like, oh, I don't know if I can write, a 100-page script. That's like a huge thing. And it's like, no, just write as much as you can and then build off of that and see what happens. And it's a very like intimidating industry for sure. And also because like it's you're never quite sure like where those things are going to go. Like, that's why it's great that you put your stuff on YouTube, because if you're making a feature and then you're like, okay, I'll make a feature, it sucks, and then it'll just get buried in my like computer or something. But because it feels very inaccessible to like distribute a film in the way that people think of distributing films a lot of the time. But like, no, you can put it on YouTube and make an audience and share your stuff and grow. And I think that's a cool way to approach it.
I think sometimes you either come out the gates like hating your first movie or hating like parts of it or things about it, or you come out your gates sort of disillusioned and like you're like, this is gonna get into Sundance. And so many people I think have that problem too, where they do take the leap and they do make either like a very involved short or like a feature, and it turned out good for like them. Like, that's a great movie and they should be proud of it, but it's not up to that like looks like a movie, sounds like a movie standard that festivals are looking for. So I think people are like, Sundance, TIFF, Cannes, Venice, they just submit their movie to the crazy biggest ones that already have such a kind of predetermined lineup in a lot of ways, and it's hard to break through, and then you get discouraged. You're like, oh, I guess I'm not a filmmaker, or I guess I don't have it in me. And
yeah, you can't get, I mean, like Pig didn't get into Sundance or Cannes, and after that I was like, oh, I thought I had made like a pretty okay movie, but like I guess not. And then people like finally saw it, and like I think it was one of those movies that like people weren't sure like what to make of it initially. They were like, wait, is this like a silly movie? Is this like a But like, yeah, you kind of just, in some ways that was like refreshing for me for my first movie, to be like, I made something that like I cared about and believed in. And then at first it felt like, oh, I don't think people are gonna like it or get it. And then it turned out that a lot of people did, which was cool. But yeah, like you can't put your like value on like, oh, what festival is it gonna get into? Like, is it gonna get distributed on Netflix, or is it like, you just, if that stuff works out, great, but like that's not why you make stuff.
Yeah, I think I remember first seeing Pig, like the trailer online or something, and the general reception seemed to be like, oh, it's John Wick with a pig.
Yeah.
And I almost think that works in the movie's service if you're open-minded, because like if you go into the movie expecting anything like that, it's so counter that. It's a very like, it's not going to give you those satisfying payoffs.
Yeah.
And I think that's what works so well about Pig is it feels like that. It feels like it could go that direction at any moment, like John Wick with the pig, and it doesn't, and it's very withheld and held back, and I like that a lot about it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, like appreciated that, like, because it also, like the movie sort of plays with that, like it's set, even in the first half an hour, you're like, oh shit, this is gonna turn into like a big revenge thing, and it kind of like gradually sort of peels that away and gets it down to this kind of simple thing. But there were definitely people, I definitely get messages on like Instagram of people. There was somebody who wrote something in Spanish and I had to translate it, and it was basically like, do you swear on this? Should I avoid swearing? It was basically like, fucking hell, like an hour and a half and Nick Cage didn't even punch anyone. Maybe you'll do something good with your life someday. And it's like, so there's definitely a response like that too. But
that's so funny that you had to translate it, and Google Translate just said the most discouraging thing to you. I definitely get those, not Spanish specifically, but just comments that are just like the most nasty teardowns of you, and you even at the core of your being, you know, there's no truth to them. But on a bad night, you'll read that and be like, God, I suck. You know?
Yeah, but it's also like you can't. I mean, everyone is looking for mass appeal, but like you can't. If you try and make a movie that everyone's gonna love, like, I mean, maybe you can pull that off, but like that's a sort of losing battle. Like you're always gonna, some people just want to see, you know, a movie where Nick Cage beats up some dudes, and like, if like you don't have to make a movie that is perfect for everyone. Like just make a movie that you believe in, and some people will respond to it. Like that's why I think this sort of Rotten Tomatoes world, where it's like either it's good or it's bad. It's like, no, like good movies exist in that middle area where like maybe half of the population will say that was garbage, then half will be like, oh, that was like made for me. And like, I mean, chasing those scores and like chasing everyone loving it is sort of a pointless venture.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like, I maybe perhaps is too generalized, but sometimes I'll refer to those movies that the general public all loves as like the IMDb top 100, you know, like it's those ones that are just so, and they're fantastic movies, they're really well made, but I find my favorite movies are often lay where you're talking about, more in the middle ground where I love it, and then I look at reactions and I'm like, half the people don't like this, or and having to remind yourself of that as an artist is very hard sometimes. But it's like when you see a negative review of your stuff, you got to remember all the positive ones you saw, and you're like, this is like resonating perhaps with more specificity, because the specificity is irking one person, but it's like deeply resonating with another person. I think that broad appeal is kind of what makes those like everyone loves it movies, except for the devil's advocate people who say Godfather's a piece of shit or something.
There's always going to be that. There's always going to be at least one person that's like, everyone loves this, but like I'm too cool to love this. It's like it's just, I mean, it's, I don't know. You also have to, I think when like reading reviews and stuff, which I try not to like do a ton, but like you always like read a little bit of stuff. Like you're curious to know what people think of it and how they respond. And like, you also have to think about like why you made something and what you were aiming for. Like, you know, like in general, like people generally liked Quiet Place, but like there were definitely people that were like, you know, why didn't we see like, there were a lot of people that were like, why didn't we see like the military like fight the aliens more? And like, why didn't we like learn about their home planet? and people were like upset about that, and I was like, well, because like I didn't want to do that. Like that wasn't what the movie was about. So like you also have to remember, like, you know, what was my intention with this, and like, am I just like gonna take everyone's like, this is what I thought this movie should be, or should I just think of, okay, what was I trying to achieve? Is their criticism founded, or is it just like they just wanted a different movie?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's helpful to sort of just be like, okay, they just wanted a different movie, and they're allowed to. Like, I'm sure there could be a fun movie where helicopters are blowing up aliens and stuff, but like that's not the movie I wanted to make.
I think they've made that movie like 50 times.
I think they have. Probably in New York City. Probably like it's yeah, that's sort of a genre unto itself.
Yeah, but I definitely am excited for whatever you make next. I think we'll wrap up the conversation here. But Robin Hood, Death of Robin Hood, coming out sometime.
What's your next one that's coming out? Are you allowed to talk about what the next?
I'm so secretive with it because I just love shadow dropping stuff. Because I mean, when you're not like trying to make money or hit some certain goal, it's just like, why not just dump it on my fans? And you know, because I'm not like marketing it or trying to like spread the word and get people hyped. I'm just like, watch it if you can watch it. You know, so I'm gonna keep it secret, tight-lipped.
I'm excited to see it, whatever it is.
Thank you. And thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this format, this very casual format. And Michael, thanks for being the first guest.
It was my pleasure. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah.
Hey, look over there. Just kidding. Thanks, man.
Yeah.